Schau mich bitte nicht so an, du weißt es, ja ich kann dir dann nicht widerstehen. Schau mir nicht so auf den Mund, du kennst genau den Grund, so kann's nicht weitergehen. Schau die Leute ringsumher, sie wundern sich schon sehr, wir sind doch nicht allein. Was mir dein zärtliches Lächeln verspricht, sollst du erst, wenn wir alleine sind, halten.
We are here in celebration of the life of our good friend Jack Hildebrandt, who was a Feldwebel in the German Luftwaffe. He was born on February 22nd, 1922, and unfortunately we lost him on May 20th, 2010. We are going to start the day's activities, our celebration, with a toast by his good friend, Feldwebel Willi Kreissmann.
Jack Hildebrandt was one of the rare specimens who had the chance to fly as a bomber pilot and as a fighter pilot. The bomber pilots said an enemy mission sent him away with the Hals- und Beinbruch greetings. The fighters sent him away with the Horrido. And for those of all of us, I want to remember him as a bomber and pilot. Horrido to Jack Hildebrandt.
Horrido.
Thank you very much. That was beautiful. And now we're going to have a little slideshow of pictures that Jack selected for us, pictures that show his life.
Es war an einem Frühlingstag im sonnigen Sorrent ein junges Mädchen und ein junger Mann. Die beiden gingen Hand in Hand im sonnigen Sorrent und ihres Lebens schönste Zeit begann. Sie waren mit dem Herz dabei und schwuren sich die ewige treu. Doch als er Abschied nahm und nicht mehr wiederkam, da weinte sie vor Gram. Für sie wird nie mehr Frühling sein im sonnigen Sorrent. Und das versteht nur, wer die Sehnsucht kennt. Ja, das versteht nur, wer die Sehnsucht kennt. Es war an einem Frühlingstag im sonnigen Sorrent ein junges Mädchen und ein junger Mann. Die beiden gingen Hand in Hand im sonnigen Sorrent und ihres Lebens schönste Zeit begann. So nahmen sie an. Schwuren sich die ewige treu. Doch als er Abschied nahm und nicht mehr wiederkam, da weinte sie vor Gram. Für sie wird nie mehr Frühling sein im sonnigen Sorrent. Und das versteht nur, wer die Sehnsucht kennt. Das
Colonel Joe Shriber, U.S. Air Force retired, will read a poem.
I flew. When the last checklist is run and the bag drag is over, I will remember the days I once knew. I will not remember the 3 a.m. alerts, but I will only remember that I flew. I will not remember the crew rest in tents, not recall the cold Arctic winds blew, and I'll try not to remember the times I got sick, but only that I flew. I will never forget when nature became angry and challenged my intrepid crew, and I'll always remember the fear I felt and the pride in knowing I flew. I will remember the sights my mortal eyes have seen, colored by multitudes of hues, the beautiful lights on cold winter nights seen only by those who flew. God was extremely good to me and let me touch his face. He saw my crew through war and peace and blessed us with his grace. So when I stand at St. Peter's gate and tell him that I'm new, I know he'll smile and welcome me because he knows I flew. Mr. John Crump. I'll let you know John's background in the military. He was born at the Naval Weapons Center down in China Lake.
Which makes me a civilian, but nonetheless very proud to always be with veterans and with the military. In November 1944, Jack Hildebrandt was flying a Focke-Wulf 190 in Holland. He was shot down by anti-aircraft. He was wounded by a .50 caliber bullet and became a prisoner of war. He ended up in a hospital compound in Marseille, France. Wounded Allied soldiers were in half of the compound and Germans were in the other half. They shared a common shower facility. Now the letters PW on Jack's pajamas were the only distinguishing marks from the pajamas worn by the GIs to the showers. So this is from Jack's manuscript. I decided to use my linguistic ability to my personal advantage. By now I was in pretty good health, but my arm was not functioning. It had now been a year since I last heard from my mother, and I wanted to get home to Wiesbaden. I put on my GI boots and my maroon GI bathrobe without PW markings on it, walked out of the ward through the gate without blinking an eye, past the sentry, who probably thought I was a GI who had wandered into the PW compound by mistake, and marched straight into the hospital commander's office, open door. I saluted. Sergeant Hildebrandt reporting. Sir? Yes. What can I do for you, Sergeant? I would like to be sent home, sir. Wouldn't we all? How many points do you have? No points, sir. No points? How can that be? You must have a lot of points after having been here in the ETO. I am not in the U.S. Army, sir. I am a German prisoner of war from the enclosure next door. The colonel's mouth fell open at first, and then he broke into a laugh. By God, you have a lot of chutzpah. Where in Germany are you from? Wiesbaden, sir. Wiesbaden, eh? Well, Wiesbaden happens to be the location of the headquarters, United States Air Force, Europe. With your command of English, I suppose you could do a lot more there than with the work detail here. Write down your rank, name, and ward. I'll see what I can do for you, Sergeant. By the way, I've never seen such gall in my life. Now get back to your ward. I saluted smartly, did an about face, and marched back to my ward through the gate. The same sentry was still standing there. He looked puzzled. He probably thought, this guy must suffer from a low marble count. He marches in and out of here not knowing where he's going and why. But he never challenged me. 2 days later, I was notified to prepare for repatriation to Germany and to process out. Fortune favors the bold.
We now have a presentation to Valerie Brooke-Wilke, who was Jack's most special friend, by Steve Kauzlarich. Valerie, could you come up, please?
I just actually received this via email, and I have a presentation. Valerie, this is from Michel Dubois. And actually, Michel had been working with Jack for, I think, a couple of years at least, right, on his manuscript. And yeah, working very hard on that. So here's her email. She's in Southern California and has a broken foot, so she couldn't make it. She says, "I'm very disappointed I could not be with you. Let's see. I thought Steve could present you Jack's completed manuscript of his life story. Jack read the manuscript a few months before he passed. He loved it so much, he broke down and cried. The most treasured possession is the copy Jack sent back to me with the corrections he wanted. Valerie, you were Jack's one and only true friend. I cannot imagine your loss. Please accept my condolences. Jack became a surrogate member of my family, and I adored him. He taught me how to be stubborn. I miss him, as we all do, and I'm deeply honored to be Jack Hildebrandt's biographer, Michelle." So, with that, there's a completed manuscript right there. It's I think it's a little bit bigger than the prior one, but it's all there, and it's just about ready for publishing.
Speechless. I have an email from her which says that she believes that the publisher is going to go forward with it. And I'm delighted. Absolutely delighted.
Yeah. So there you go, and you can read that over, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy it very much.
What title has there been set?
Oh, there are some changes. I think Ah, Donkey Galloping Out of Hell. It's back to his title. Great. That is what his nursemaid said when he was misbehaving. I would like to think that he is one of those youngsters that we now call hyperactive. I work with these kids I teach, and I love every one of them because I know what they're capable of, and I recognize it. It's wonderful. I have, if I can have just a few minutes, I have been getting emails from his friends from afar who couldn't be here, and I'd like to just read a few excerpts. His cousin in Germany, that's not it. Oh, let me do a different one. Sorry, I am not all together. I really was rocked by this loss, as I know many of you were also. This is from a friend that he worked with at Air Force Systems Command. I first met Jack in 1972 when I came from DIA to work for the Air Force at Andrews Air Force Base. I don't know how long Jack had been there before I arrived, but not long, I think. He had transferred from St. Louis and delighted in telling me, I don't know how many times, how much he loathed and detested St. Louis. He used to tell me also. It didn't take me long to figure out that it wasn't St. Louis, but the miserable editorial job he had with the Army. We worked together doing not quite as miserable things on an international level until 1980, when I transferred to the Pentagon to work in the Office of the Secretary of Defense, but we never lost touch and remained close until he moved to California. I visited him on a business trip to Livermore Labs, and he came east to attend my daughter's wedding. We even got together in Europe once when he was visiting Wiesbaden, so he could proudly show me where he was born. I think of the phrase, "I'm a lover, not a fighter," but in Jack's case, he was both, and damn proud of it. I am not sure what it was that attracted Jack to me, meaning his friend, but he was a fascinating and true friend. I believed he had lived enough for 3 people. We would love to discuss or argue politics, war, what have you. He could be a bit set in his ways, but you could never get mad at him. I would like to say more, but would need more time to collect my thoughts. One last word, however. I guess this must have originated with him. He claimed he was an ace in reverse because he managed to crash 5 Luftwaffe planes during the war. Okay. Another one comes from his cousin in Germany, and one of the photographs was of his cousin's 2 adult children who came and skied with Jack here in the States because he was studying and doing a postdoctoral program in Southern California. Jack is the son of my grandfather's brother. He grew up with parents who were pretty rich but lost all their money during World War II. Later they were divorced. The only person who gave love to Jack was his nanny, the famous Anna, and I think that's why Jack fell in love with me. I reminded him of Anna. My grandmother always told me that I do have an uncle in America, but nobody really knew anything about him. In post-war Germany, an uncle in America was something good to have, since these uncles were supposed to be rich and help their German families to get back to their feet after the war. As everyone can read in Jack's memoirs, he was as poor as can be when he entered the USA. He literally had $3. And he came up from that. Astounding. But he lived the American dream and ended up in California, where he enjoyed permanent sunshine and warm temperatures, since he knew what it meant to freeze to death at the Russian front. As soon as he retired from his military duties, he reestablished contact with his family in Germany, and he went on for quite a while. This is a man who had just arrived back from being gone for a 5-day medical conference, and that was the picture that showed him with his skiing buddies and family. He really missed having a family like that, and it made Jack happy to learn about his 2 young cousins who were growing up, their 2 sons. This is from a friend in Germany who worked in intelligence with him. Jack has been in my book as one of the most unforgettable colleagues and friends and characters of my professional and personal life. Without fail, he was trustworthy, noble, upstanding, loyal, and brave to the point of self-effacement. While I have known a few people, very few fortunately, in and out of uniform, who were good riddance when they finally left this planet, Jack is among the small handful who, in my view, are hard to replace, if at all. I shall cherish his memory for as long as the good Lord will allow me to live. This is another pilot who has flown a single-engine plane all alone from the United States to Europe. He wanted Jack to go with him, but Jack's wife was afraid, so Jack was kind and didn't go. He's regretted it ever since. Now, this was something I had said to John and Barbara Crump. I miss Jack terribly. He was an extraordinary man, insightful, courageous, loyal, kind, and gifted with a marvelous sense of humor. And in the back of the room, there's this goofy devil costume with the red tights and the horns and the tail. Jack wore that on Halloween to parties year after year. What a great guy. This is from one of the daughters who could not be here. Jack loved our mom. He loved her patiently, persistently, and completely. What more is there to say about a man's life? He loved her since she was 16, and he moved across the country many, many years later to claim her. I realized a month ago that I had never understood how rich and deep their love really was. I wish I'd seen more clearly, if only to honor their friendship more fully in my heart. You should have seen him at our family gatherings with his German champagne, the same one that we have today, that he always bought. He was a fabulous man, and he embraced us all, though I know we didn't at first as easily welcome a new man into our mother's life. He especially loved and protected our youngest sister, Casey, when she so needed a father present. For this, I know she will always love him, and so will I. And Casey can barely speak about him yet. She is living in Australia. and she is engaged to a man who embodies the wonderful character that Jack modeled for her. And I am so pleased. I feel what a heritage from him. See, I think I'm almost done. Yeah, I am done. Part of Jack, which may not show in the current memoirs, is what a succès fou he was with the ladies. They all loved him. I am getting still, addressed to Jack, letters from the women who have loved Jack through the years. They are all signed, all my love, love, love forever. And they're great gals. He just was magic. And for those of you who would like some of this success, he said it was largely because he was not bothered by rejection. I think it was that he was incredibly loving, just beyond belief. And I think that's probably why so many people came to remember him today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Valerie.
So as you can see, we're recording this, and we're going to now have guest remembrances of Jack, and it would be really nice if you would stand, at least face the camera, perhaps stand also. We're just going to bring the mic around the room, and if you have a little story you'd like to tell about Jack and something special, we'd love to know what it was. We'll start with you.
See?
No, we're going to do just tell a little story about Jack.
You understand?
Oh, would you mind standing?
Yes, I will, but I'm trying to figure out what to say. When I joined this group, the Golden Gate chapter, there was a picture hanging in the corner in some place of a man in German uniform with the hat on, and I was curious, and I was told it would be Jack Hildebrandt. So the next time I came to the meeting, Jack was there, and I introduced myself, and so we agreed that we were the two German pilots in this American gathering. And I was wondering at the time how well this would work out after we had been several years on opposite sides. And I have to say, Jack said to me, you will be home here just like in a German Air Force unit. Take it easy. So that is probably what I would like to talk is my first impression with Jack, meeting him here, and after meeting him many other times later, we had a chance to exchange some of our views. But as always, in these meetings you talk about what happens today and you barely have time to talk about what happened past. And we always said another time, and the other time is never here. It's too late. And so I herewith say farewell to Jack, my friend and our friend. And I also express my appreciation how cordial, how well our two German pilots worked with this group. And I have had the opportunity to be dinner speaker at 2 occasions, and there I felt in particular the interest of everybody and the lack of any hostility. So thank you all very much. Thank you.
Unfortunately, I didn't have the chance to meet Jack more than once. We exchanged our experiences I always liked his humor. He was telling me how he crashed already as a student very early. And later on, his experience as a Junkers 88 pilot. He was very close in 1942. One of his first missions was up in the northeastern part of Russia. And I was at that time maybe about 80, 100 miles farther south. And both we were flying against the onrush of some Russian armies trying to break through. That was my experience with him. It was a friend, a pilot friend, and we exchanged ideas. And I saluted him, as we before said, with the Horrido and Halsenbeinbruch.
In the background.
We're going to pass this on to John.
Just a couple quick observations. Jack grew up wanting to fly. He was able to do that with a war on. He, I believe, saw his duty as well as the opportunity to fly, and he flew a lot of relatively low-level missions. He braved flak, his very first mission. He had a crew member that was right next to him that was hit by anti-aircraft, and it killed him immediately. He was shot down 5 times. He escaped from 10 miles behind Russian lines. I was always impressed that he had really felt that his life was made possible today by the risks that he had always taken. He'd always chosen to take the risk. I think after thinking it through, when he could. And on the humorous side, I was always impressed that even though he drove a little red sports car, and which said Wing King, I believe, on the license plate, that he realized that motorcycles were better not something that he should ride. So I think he realized his limitations in that respect. But it has been it's been a wonderful experience to have been Jack's friend, and I think we're all the richer, certainly, for that.
I'll give it a short whirl, too. The first time I met Jack was at the older building, a World War II building that was shared with the CAP. It's now a car rental place. Jack was a speaker. I don't remember who it was that brought Jack as a speaker that night, but I remember in the beginning time during the social hour, it was crowded. And I hadn't met him. I didn't know what to look for. And suddenly I saw people gathering around, and he was not very tall, but he had in his arm a big, thick album, well, not an album, a published book, entitled Luftwaffe Aces. So I said, aha, this must be our speaker. So I walked up to him when there was a moment and introduced myself and wanted to meet him. And I said, so Jack, you're in that book? He said, me? An ace? No, I'm a reverse ace. I was shot down 5 times. So like you've heard that before, but that was my introductory exposure with Jack. Another thing that kind of captures his, and a follow-up on John Crump is, yes, he came to a meeting, I recall one time, and he was all bandaged up. He had a cast on him and everything, and it was a motorcycle experience. And apparently, I don't know the details, but apparently, in the moment of reaction to a possible accident or something, he did the reactive thing, and our motorcycles here are different than in Germany. And instead of hitting the brakes, he hit the accelerator. So he had a crash. Another thing that I always think about, because he was a charming little devil in many ways, and humor, and he joined, I think it was a Palo Alto, a flight club. I know all of you know this story, but he was a member, but it didn't last very long. They kicked him out because he refused to fly straight and level. He was always doing everything else. And one other thing that kind of ties in with that is many of us know about, and some have experienced, the chance to fly in a pretty high-performance airplane. They called it air combat, I think it was. They flew a high-performance Italian aircraft. Jack took that up right away, and he many times repeated that experience. I don't know, I think it was $500 or something per time, and he flew so many times that they finally basically just said, come when you wish. So there are many more, but thank you for the opportunity to have this very meaningful celebration.
Thank you, Phil.
A friend of mine invited me to the CAF meeting, and I didn't know anything about it. He says, oh, you got to come and see this group. And Jack was the speaker that night, and that locked me in. I've been a member ever since. Really enjoy it. Thanks to Jack.
We think we had not very much in common, Jack and I. Jack mostly in the air, and I'm on the ground. But we shared common places in Russia, in the North Russian front, Pleskau or Pskov in Russian, and no DNO, no. And he confirmed something I knew from talking to her. He said that was true, that the Russians had an airplane, we called it the Nähmaschine, or the sewing machine, that made this noise. And they were flown by women. And there, through where they saw a light and threw a bomb down overboard. It didn't have where to hang the bombs, no? And they flew and buzzed us very much on the ground. And then in the south, two airfields, one is marked on this map, is Taganrog. Taganrog, I came from the south on a Junkers W-34 as a passenger. And then again, Zaporozhye was the other airfield. Of course, Jack knew both fields from flying in or flying out. That's all what we had in common. No, just some memories. That's it.
I wasn't going to say anything, but I don't think it's appropriate not to. First, we all owe a round of applause to Jan for her great work in coordinating and encouraging all of us to come. To John Lowry, who had this wonderful portrait made of Jack at Staples, correct? It reminded me of the F-86 and the MiG-15 portrait in black and white that was made of you on the ground. And to Valerie, who brought all of these wonderful mementos of Jack. Jack came and spoke at my Rotary Club probably 10 years ago on the spur of the moment. And I videotaped that speech and have never looked at it. I think it's on Super 8 film, so I'm going to have that converted maybe with Steve's help. I wrote a little poem about Jack. It's entitled To Jack, a friend of many, a foe of few, except for the 5 who knew that he flew for the Luftwaffe and not for you, at least on those days. But he later joined our side after the war was through, and he befriended us all, yes, through and through, as he flew high and low and into the blue. So our hats are off to you, Jack. Yes, to you. You are our friend, and we're so true. Thank you.
I certainly would never have been on board for a fighter peel-off if I hadn't gone flying with Jack. Definitely one of the most exciting parts of my life. And what I learned from Jack was, when in doubt, firewall it. And that was such good advice, and it's carried me through many situations.
I met Jack when I first started attending the CAF meetings out at the old Oakland Airport, and realized he was a very likable person to talk to, and only saw him occasionally when we had the dinner meetings. But one thing that really stands out in my mind was his story, and I mean, it's really a made-for-Hollywood movie story. They could make a film that would be unbelievable about his experiences flying. That alone was something that I'll always remember. And also, I've been honored now to attend 2 special events, both organized by Jan. And one was about 8 years ago, I believe, and that was his 80th birthday party. And that was an experience. And now this event celebrating his life. And I really feel honored, and I want to thank Jan for doing this. It was a large undertaking, and I'm sure everyone here appreciates it immensely. Thank you.
Hi, Scott. Okay. I met Jack through Larry, and Larry called me up or emailed me or something, because I was in school at Mills College, and I'm a history major, and I was doing my thesis on life, everyday life in Germany during the Third Reich. And he said, hey, there's a gentleman that was in Germany during those times. He was a Luftwaffe pilot, and he's being interviewed by a woman who's writing a book about him, and they'll be at the museum, blah, blah, blah. You might be able to listen to them if you are quiet. And I said, uh-oh, but was I quiet? Okay. So we really all hit it off. They were super nice. Michelle and Jack and what's your name again? Steve, that's right. We all hit it off. They were super great. And Otto was here. And Michelle and I really hit it off. So we had a lunch. She invited me to her place, and Jack and Otto were there. And then we had lunch at Jack's place, and he told me that I was his type of woman. And now I'm starting to think his type of woman was one that's just breathing. So anyway, yeah, I'm really glad I would never have brought that up, but you mentioned it. No, I'm Anastasia, Stacy. But no, sorry. Yeah, not that one. But I would never have brought this up, but you mentioned it at the end, so I didn't want to disrespect you.
They said it didn't move the story forward.
There was enough in the books. Yeah, you didn't need us. So anyway, but he was a really wonderful man. I just want to say, Larry had told me about a story that had always stuck in my mind about, and you can correct me, Larry, if I get this wrong or messed up. He was in a field hospital getting surgery on his arm, and the next thing he knew, he looked up, and there wasn't a roof over his head, it was just sky, and the nurse was lying on his stomach and the doctor was dead on the ground, and why did that happen?
I hope I didn't make that up, but
Here, why did that happen?
Well, I'm pretty sure that's the way I remember him telling the story. Is that correct? Yeah. So it was, again, one of those films that should be made about his life.
And his arm was still cut up, and he was still in the middle of surgery, so he was kind of pissed off. Okay, that's it.
Yeah, the first time my wife and I met Jack, he's, as everybody said, he's a pistol. It was something else. But the thing I remember the most was his 80th birthday. I heard that that day or the day afterward, he went over to Palo Alto to a flying club to go on an aerobatic plane. And he scared the death out of the instructor. He took over the plane, he was doing loops and barrel rolls and all kinds of things like that. So that's how I remember Jack.
Do I say something else?
When I first met Jack, he didn't have his ribbons and medals on. And I put my hand on his left side, and I felt something underneath his jacket. Come to find out, he wore his medals, but he wouldn't wear them out in the open. I took him outside, took the medals out, put them on the right place, brought him back in. From that day on, every time he seen me, he'd go like this. And Jack was a very friendly man, and he was a very smart man. He really knew his aircraft, and he knew what he was doing when he had emergencies and stuff. I don't know. I think there was more than just God up there watching the one. There's somebody else. But he was a very nice man, and I liked him very much. Thank you.
I've known Jack since the first time he spoke here, which was in March of 1993. That was my first meeting. That's the reason I remember it. And he gave the same story about where he showed up in at Ellis Island with $3 in his pocket, and he had one relative in New York, and he had an address that he didn't know how current it was, and he showed up on the doorstep. Nobody was home. He waited till midnight, and finally his relative came home, and the rest became history. He started working in New York, and he worked in delis, he worked in tailor shops, he worked in restaurants, every place else, and then he finally got into intelligence. He worked for 35 years in intelligence in the Air Force Combat Intelligence Division, and retired in 1987. And he came to California one time, and he decided this was the place he wanted to live. But what I want to tell you about is during the last 6 or 7 years, he's been very resilient. Almost every winter he would get pneumonia. And pneumonia is a killing disease if you can't cure it. But he would get, and during the winter time, he would get a little bit of pneumonia, and he was able to overcome that and just come back to himself. And he's had several painful situations. He tripped over his chair one night and hit his knee, or his leg, and he ended up with cellulitis, and that kept him in pain for about 3 months. And then he had prostate surgery, and he was in pain for about another 4 months because somehow or another it didn't quite heal right, and he went to another doctor and got him cured. But anytime you talked to him, he didn't exhibit pain. He always had humor and good mood and everything. And I would take him out to lunch because he was relatively alone. And while I lived there, I worked at Lockheed in Palo Alto, wasn't that far away. So I'd call him up and say, you want to go to lunch or dinner? And I'd take him out. And he would always relate to experiences during his life. He lived in Germany, but after he came back here, he went to Germany, but he didn't like that as much as other parts of Europe. And the one that he was impressed with the most was Tuscany, Italy. He went to Tuscany. He liked the way that the place was situated in a villa up in the hills. He went to a restaurant, and he had Lambrusco wine. So one night, I asked him, where do you want to go to dinner? And he says, how about the Olive Garden? Let's go there. We'll check that out. And so the waitress came up and said, "Do you want something to drink?" And he says, "Do you have Lambrusco?" And she says, "Yes." "Oh, okay, I'm going to come here every night." Because that does, to me, it tastes a little bit like cold duck, but it's a sparkling wine. And anyway, he liked that wine, so I told him, I said, "You can go down to Bedmo and buy it if you'd like." But he says, "I don't drink wine at home. I have to come out and appreciate the view with the waitresses and the dinner," whatever. But like I say, he was one of the most resilient people I've ever known. He never complained about anything that I've ever seen him worry about or anything, except that he would tell you when he's in pain if you ask him, but he wouldn't tell you unless you asked him. And he was a true friend to us, and he liked the Confederate Air Force, which became the Commemorative Air Force, mainly because of the camaraderie. That's what he said the military he had when he was in Germany. There was a close-knit family. And he said it was friendly here because everybody would always, you wouldn't be left standing alone, especially with him. Everybody liked to corner him and talk to him. But I'll always remember him, and I'll miss him, and I'm glad we were able to have this event. Thank you, Jan.
If I may, I'd just like to add a footnote. I believe it's in the manuscript, but I know Jack talked about this one time, and it kind of reflects his feistiness that we all recognized. And he always wanted to fly, I'm sure. And when World War II was looming, he talked about how he wanted to fly, so he went out he tried to get into the Luftwaffe. I don't know if that was the right term then, but it was an airport or some little place outside of Berlin. And he went out and he was rejected because he couldn't get his feet on the rudders and he couldn't see over the canopy thing, and so he was sent back. And as we've seen from the photos and from those of us who have talked with Jack, he came from a rather high-level family, and his uncle, his mother's brother, as I recall, was a general, and still active general, who was, I think, a very strong veteran from World War I. So his mother, at Jack's request, made a phone call to her brother, and I think it was just a short time thereafter he was called back to the little airfield, and he talked about how they solved the problem by taking a large Berlin telephone book, you've heard this, and put it on his cockpit seat, and then they took some 4x4s and chopped up a couple of those and taped them onto the rudder pedals, and he made it.
Being the video guy for the CAF since I started about a month afterwards, I'm always setting up or shooting or striking. So I never really got a chance to know Jack like a lot of people did. But a few things stand out in my mind. One was his 80th birthday party that Jan held for him over at Jock Littlefield's estate. And the one thing that stands out in my mind about that is when it came time to bring the cake out, it had all the 80 candles on the cake. And it was lit back off somewhere. And when they carried the cake out, all those 80 candles all kind of converged into one massive flame. I'm telling you, that cake was on fire when it came out. I had a little trouble putting that one out. So that was funny. I remember that one. And also, when we did the videotaping here with him, I think it was about 3 years ago, I really got to know, there were 7 tapes made with Jack, and this was the last of the 7th. But I really got to see a different side of Jack that I'd never seen before. You know, there was really a lot in there, and I just never knew that. So I was glad that at least I got to share that little piece and know what I knew there. And then the final thing that I always remember about dinner meetings when Jack was there, it always seemed like Jack had something to say during a dinner meeting, you know, and he would always, he would always, raise his hand or just start talking, and somebody would inevitably yell out, "Stand up," and then somebody else would yell out, "He is standing." And I also wanted to thank Jan for putting this whole thing together, and Joe and whoever else worked on it very hard, because this is really, really a nice tribute. Thank you, Jan.
Well, I've had a whole bunch of fun doing this, and Joe Shriber is responsible for funding our wonderful afternoon here. So thank you, Joe. He sent me a check last week, and it was more than ample to cover everything that we've consumed today. And I got my last... And Joe is very communicative. I received an email even today about what was going to be going on. He had a little tiny tidbit of information I didn't know and was kind enough to pass it on to me. And then about the 80th birthday, the reason that came about is we were at a meeting a couple of months before his birthday, and he sort of mentioned that he was going to be turning 80. I said, well, what are you going to be doing? And he said, well, I don't know. He didn't really have any plans. And I thought, well, that can't be. You're going to be 80. You got to have a birthday party. So I thought, well, I'll take Jack out for dinner. So I asked him if I could take him out for dinner with Valerie, of course. And he said, well, that sounds like a nice idea, but do you think it would be possible to also invite so-and-so? So then it turned into a party of 4 or 5. And then a couple other names came up. And then a few other people were mentioned. And then it was a party of 16. And so when it got to be around 20, I called up Jacques Littlefield, who lived down the Palo Alto area, and said, well, I'm having a birthday party for a friend who was in the Luftwaffe. He's going to be 80, and I need to find a restaurant that has a private room so that we can just be with ourselves. And he says, well, since it's for you and since it's for him, why don't you have it here in the music room? And Jacques had, besides the world's best and largest collection of tanks from an incredible place. He has the world's largest pipe organ, privately owned, in a home situation. And he has it in a room he calls the music room, and the Stanford organ students can go up there anytime, day or night, and play this thing. It's on a wing of the house. He never locked his house. And he said we could have the party there, and he couldn't attend, but he said we'll have tours of the tank facility, and so we got a little caterer together and had a very nice event for Jack's 80th birthday. Which, the part that I liked the best was that I had at the time a CD that was a P-51 flying by, and it had really good left to right acoustics, and so I had it playing so that when you were in the room, suddenly you'd hear this airplane, and it sounded like it was coming through the room. So that was the most fun thing for me. So the highlight of today, for me, is about to happen, because one thing that Jack really wanted to have happen at his service was to have the traditional German song, which will now be introduced by his very good friend, Feldwebel Eberhard Wirtz.
Ladies and gentlemen, you have this Ich hatte einen Kameraden piece of paper in your folder.
It's a translation too.
And so it translates the tradition and the story about the song of the Good Comrade. And it also points out that this is an official song used by the German military and other related outfits on historic occasions. And it is even being sung by the Foreign Legion in France. So should I first sing it, and then you can all join me so you pick up the tone? So we sing the first verse. Ich hab einen Kameraden, einen bessern findest du nicht. Die Trommel schlug zum Streite, ging an meiner Seite, im gleichen Schritt und Tritt, im gleichen Schritt und Tritt. Eine Kugel kam geflogen, gilt sie ihm oder gilt sie mir? Sie hat ihn weggerissen, liegt
zu meinen Füßen, als wär's ein Stück von mir, als wär's ein Stück von mir. Will mir die Hand noch reichen, derweil ich eben lad, kann dir die Hand nicht geben, bleib du im ewigen Leben, mein guter Kamerad, mein guter Kamerad.
Thank you. Thank you.
Danke.
Very good.
Wow. So, a missing man formation is traditionally given for a military man who was involved with aviation, and it involves airplanes flying in formation, and then one peels off to represent the man who has gone west, which is another term that we use. And we're now going to honor our friend Feldwebel Jack Hildebrandt with a missing man formation. Thank you, Steve Kauzlarich, for that beautiful tribute. You're watching this because Steve Kauzlarich, our wing leader, is also a professional videographer, and he understands the importance of the people that you see in this organization, the three gentlemen who just sang for us, many other veterans. Thank you very much.
Alleine sind halten, schau mich bitte nicht so an. Du weißt es doch, ich kann nicht widerstehen. Was mir dein zärtliches Lächeln verspricht, sollst du erst, wenn wir alleine sind, halten. Schau mich bitte nicht so an, du weißt es doch, ich kann nicht widerstehen.